from Enchanted Equine Adventures in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And this is part 2 of our series on equine welfare. It's our responsibility. And in the last section, we went over overall health for horses, especially those in lesson programs. And in this section, we're going to go over equine digestion. This particular piece of information about digestion is good for all horses, whether they're in a lesson program, in a therapeutic riding program, or just in your backyard and you go for trail rides every now and then. So, equine digestion. Horses have been living on this planet for millions of years without us. And without us, they would eat 15 to 17 hours a day. They would sleep and run at different periods of time during the day as well. Horses' stomachs produce stomach acid all day long, whereas we humans only produce stomach acid when we're hungry. Horses have stomach acid in their stomach all the time. So it's very important to make sure that there is some sort of forage in your horse's stomach before you're going to work him or her. What happens when you put some hay inside that stomach that's full of acid is that it keeps the acid from splashing up to the upper part of the stomach, and it keeps ulcers from forming or becoming worse if they already have them. Studies have shown that about 90% of racehorses have ulcers and 60% of performance horses have ulcers. Now that includes horses who have been retired from either of those fields, and a lot of our lesson horses have been retired from those fields. So unless you're going to do a scope and see if there are gastric ulcers present, just go ahead and feed your horse like there are ulcers present. So horses should have forage available all day long, as often as possible, especially right before they're going to work. So if that means that you feed them before they work, or you tie a hay net up to the fence while you groom them and tack them up, that will ensure that they have some forage in their stomach to help with the acids. The key piece to this is to limit periods of fasting. So when a horse is fasting, his stomach acids are moving around and bouncing around and making ulcers worse. So you want to limit the periods of fasting. So however you can do that. Big round bales, slow feed hay nets, or some other kind of slow feeder. There are lots of slow feeders out there on the market. Just be careful and do your research. The ones with the metal grates on top of them can damage horses' teeth. So just be careful of the product you're buying. Make sure you do lots of research on it. And be sure to work with your vet or nutritionist to come up with the best diet for your horse. I have a bachelor's in science. I am not a veterinarian, and I am not a nutritionist. I am a student of science, and I love to read new studies and get new information to help my horses. So I've done this research to help you with your horses, but always consult with your veterinarian. If you have a nutritionist, consult with them. If you can't, consult with your own nutritionist. Places like SmartPak have nutritionists on staff that you can consult with, and there's lots of nutritionists online. Again, do your research and just make sure the credentials are actually true for whomever you are consulting with. My favorite nutritionist on the planet is Dr. Juliette Getty. She has a website, and that will be in our reference material, and she does blogs. And Dr. Getty has a wealth of knowledge about equine digestion. And pretty much any question you have about digestion, or even an issue that you don't think is related to digestion, she will show you the light. She has great information, so please consult her website to get some answers and maybe something to try if you think, perhaps your horse is suffering from something. If your horse has GI or metabolic issues, consult with your vet and make sure that you know your risk factors. I have one horse who is prone to laminitis. So the way I feed him is going to be a little bit different than the way I feed my thoroughbred. So know your risk factors for ulcers, for colic, for laminitis, and metabolic disease. Just make sure that you know these things before you go ahead and change your horse's diet. So SmartPak is a partner with PATH, and SmartPak has provided me this amazing diagram just as a visual for you to show you the size and complexity of a horse's digestive tract. And you may not know this, or you may, but the horse's small intestines are 70 feet long. 70 feet. That's a lot of area to get into an issue. And this also shows the hindgut, and we haven't really talked much about the hindgut yet, but currently there are no tests available to prove definitively that your horse has hindgut ulcers. There are lots of signs to look for that your horse might have some hindgut ulcers, but there are no tests to prove them, as there are for gastric ulcers. So, again, feed your horse based on the signs that you see. If you think perhaps he might have some ulcers in his hindgut, try and feed him and see if that helps with his issues. So, let's talk about a couple of different aspects of feeding for digestive issues. Beet pulp is probably one of my favorite feeds on the planet. Beet pulp is simply that. It's the pulp left over from sugar beets after the sugar is extracted from the beets. It's the fibrous portion that is left over. So there is inherently no sugar in it, because the sugar industry is not going to give us a product that has sugar still in it. So it's just fiber. That's all it is. And it's processed differently depending on whom you get it for. As long as you buy the beet pulp without molasses, there will be no sugar in it. So this is good, really good thing for those with any kind of metabolic issue. The great thing about beet pulp is that it feeds the gut flora in the hindgut. It's a quicker, faster source of energy. So the hay, the forage, is the slower burning source of energy, and the beet pulp will get through quicker and will be a faster source of energy. And it'll feed those hindgut flora so that your horse is a little bit happier. And if you purchase the beet pulp without molasses, there's no need to dump the water. Leave the water in. It's another source of water for your horse. But it will soak up all the water, and there are lots of myths out there about feeding dry beet pulp. Now, do not feed your horse an entire bag of dry beet pulp. But beet pulp dried is included in lots of processed feeds, so don't be too worried if your horse doesn't get as much water in his beet pulp. So let's talk about alfalfa hay. Alfalfa hay in general is fed to racehorses and performance horses, and a lot of rescued horses who have had starvation issues, lack of food. But alfalfa hay doesn't have to have as bad a rap as it does. Alfalfa hay is really good for horses with issues of tying up. It's good for horses with ulcers. It's good for horses with metabolic issues. You just have to be cautious of how much you're actually feeding your horse. The calcium level in alfalfa hay is usually really high. And if you think about what we as humans take when we have an upset stomach, we take Tums. So what is Tums? It's calcium. So alfalfa has a lot of calcium in it. So you can supplement a little bit of alfalfa to help your horse with any kind of a digestive issue. The best thing for you to do as a horse owner, and this does not take a lot of time or a lot of money, is to get your hay tested. You can get it tested You can get it tested each time you pick up your hay. You can get it tested each time you go to a new vendor. When they change fields, when they do second, third, fourth cutting, you can test it each time, and you can then look at those ratios of magnesium to calcium to starches to proteins to sugars. You can look at all those things, and it'll help you make decisions on what to feed your own horse. Best practice that I have found is to supplement grass hay with alfalfa pellets. And a pelleted alfalfa has, again, a high concentration of calcium, but it usually has a couple of additives, different minerals and vitamins that are added to it that'll help, and it'll still have the same effect on your horse's digestive tract. So having good quality hay for your horse is the best thing that you can do for him. Getting it tested will also help, but having good quality hay in general won't require any supplementation on a healthy horse. The big thing about your hays is that you need to know the difference between them. You need to know the difference between a grass hay and a legume hay and a grain hay. There are so many different hays out there. I live here in Albuquerque, New Mexico, which is the desert. We're living in a drought, hotter than normal temperatures right now. Alfalfa grows like crazy here. Bermuda hay, which is what I feed my horses, does not like to grow here. There's a new, it's not a new hay, but it's new to a lot of us, called teff hay. And teff, T-E-F-F, is an Ethiopian crop, and it loves the heat and it loves the drought. And teff grows like crazy. And teff is really good for horses. Some of them won't eat it, they won't like it at first, but it's really good for horses. Some of the tractors don't like teff because teff grows to be like 7 feet tall, and the tractors have a hard time processing it. There's lots of different oat hays, and there's lots of different grass hays. Again, get your hay tested so you know exactly what's in it. Ask your farmer about pesticides. My local guy here, he uses seaweed. Ask them about the pesticides. Know what you're putting into your horse's body. And getting your hay tested is a very simple, easy test, and I think it costs about $35. It's definitely worth it. You can also recommend to your hay supplier to have him or her get their own hay tested. My guy will do it once a season. He doesn't do it with every cutting. So if I want it for the second or third cutting, I have to go do it myself. So again, utilizing different methods of slow feed, hay nets, hay feeders is your best bet to ensure that your horses are eating all day long. But do some research, like I said, and figure out what's the best method to do that. Some people have a pasture, and that's fantastic. Again, I live here in New Mexico where everyone's on dry lots. So having a big bale of, big round bale is probably a good idea for some of us here in New Mexico. And then another piece that a lot of our hays are missing are those omegas. So adding something that gives your horse some omega-3s and 6s is probably a good idea. Flaxseed is a good way to do that. You can also do that with some oils. I know that was a lot of information. I hope it was helpful for you. I'm sure you have lots of questions and you'll have to rewind and go do lots of research. I hope you do, and I hope you learn something, and I hope that it helps your horses. And if you have any questions, you can send them to me. If you want a copy of the reference material, send me an email. I'll get that out to you as soon as possible. And thank you for watching, and we'll see you on the next video where we're going to talk about burnout and saddle fit. Thanks.